need connection. Increase my bandwidth. Increase my strength. I need the power. I need better connection. Strength like no other. It reaches. It reaches.
Good morning. I'm here to introduce Mr. Alvin Brooks. Alvin Brooks is a former Kansas City police officer, city councilman, and mayor pro tem, as well as the founder of the ad hoc group against crime. His decades of civil rights, violence protection, and criminal justice advocacy led George H.W. Bush to appoint him to the President's National Advisory Council, and Mayor's Governor Jay Nixon to appoint him to the Kansas City Board of Police Commissioners. Brooks has also worked as a business councilman, motivational speaker, and lecturer, conducting hundreds of seminars about cultural and racial diversity, religious tolerance, and civil rights. Brooks was elected to 2 uncontested terms to the City Council. Brooks' life work has been to better his community, make the world fair for all, and diminish bias and discrimination. His recently released book, Binding Us Together, is his unique personal story of character, activism, and perseverance, and the public story of connection to the city and national leaders during dramatic times. Provides a hands-on guide for the future generation regarding the need to be vigilant against bias. Brooks is often called Kansas City's most beloved civil rights activist and public servant. Brooks is a recipient of numerous awards, among are the Harriet S. Truman Award for Public Service, Alumni of the Year Award, University of Missouri at Kansas City, Alumni Achievement Award, UMKC, Humanitarian Award, American Red Cross, National Conference of Christians and Jews Outstanding Citizen Award, Peaceman Award, African American Student Union, Whitney Young Junior Service Award, Boy Scouts of America, Carl R. Johnson Humanitarian Award, Metropolitan Community College Legacy Award, FBI Community Leadership Award 2019, Kansas City End of the Year, Kansas City Chamber of Conference, the Henry W. Bloch Humanitarian Relations Award, Invictus Award for Social Justice, Liberty, Missouri, MLK Junior Committee 15 and Mahomes Foundation Community MVP Award. The new Alvin Brooks Center for Faith Justice will be built on the Rockhurst University campus. Brooks holds on the bachelor's and master's degrees from UMKC. He and his late wife, Carol, were married 63 years and the parents of 6 children, 17 grands, 45 greats, and 15 great-greats. Alvin is a proud member of the St. Monica's Catholic Church. Please stand and welcome Mr. Alvin Brooks.
Thank you very much. Give it up to Lil Marzell. Thank you so much. Thank you. You read it just like I wrote it. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Good morning. It's good to be here with with Pastor Lester and Sister Lester and all of you here at this Bethel Family Worship Center. I just live about 10 minutes west of here. Pastor, I didn't go to church this morning, so I thought I would come to hear something from you, but you said enough with the choir. Thank you so much. The reason I wanted to stand down here rather than up at the pulpit, just wanted to kind of get a little more intimate with each one of you. God of our worthy years, God of our silent tears, thou who has brought us thus far along the way. What is that from? What is that phrase from? Okay, the Black National Anthem. Thank you so very much. I thought some of y'all might know that. But God, let's pause a moment, if you will, in the presence of the Creator and each other. God, we worship here with you this morning in this sacred and holy ground that you've blessed with a pastor and a companion, a family church that come to hear the word and feel the Spirit and your presence in our lives. Now, God, we thank you for the nights that have preceded us, the day that we now share, and the days that shall follow. God, teach us to love each other as you love us. In those two holy books, the Quran, the Torah, and the Bible, you said, in the beginning you created heaven and earth and everything therein. The fish of the sea, the fowl of the air, the creatures that crawl. And God, you decided to make humankind in your likeness and in your image. Therefore, oh God, we are brothers and sisters, whether we want to be or not. Not only in our families, oh God, but all 6 billion of us on planet Earth, and more specifically, the 330 million of us in these United States. God, thank you. Thank you for our presence, that we were able to get up this morning and come to this sacred and hallowed place under the leadership of this great preacher, Pastor Lester. Now, God, let those words that I say be what you would have me to say. And when we leave this place, oh God, to our various abodes, go with us and be with us henceforth and forevermore. And this is our prayer, oh God, in your Son's name. Amen. Amen. Thank you. Sound like a preacher, didn't it? Pass the plate again. Thank you so much, Pastor Lester, for inviting me in. This is what they call African American History Month. Anybody know when it got started, though? Anybody when it got really started? Anybody? I mean, we're in class. We're going to do a little teaching and a little learning. You ever heard the name of Dr. Carter G. Woodson? Started Negro History Week back in 1926. And then in 1970, we declared nationally Black History Month. But you see, there's really no black history, because black history is a part of American history. But folks who edited us out of that history. Let's take a journey. It's said in 1776 in that Declaration of Independence, penned across the parched paper by Thomas Jefferson, that's when America started. And we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Now, there's a flaw there, because there were 4 million slaves who are not included in that Declaration of Independence. So maybe that's not where America really started. Maybe it started in 1619 in Virginia, when those 20-plus slaves were brought here from their homeland. That's when capitalism started. Then when those so-called founding fathers got together, the First Continental Congress in Philadelphia in 1787 to form a more perfect union. Maybe that's why the Liberty Bell cracked, because the union was not perfect then, and it ain't perfect now. And then in 1791, the first 10 articles of the Constitution that deal with all the rights and privileges that you receive if you're a citizen of these United States. But let me back up just back to 1787. In that forming of the Constitution, it states about every state should have 2 senators, regardless of the size. Whether it's Rhode Island, or Texas, or California, you still have 2 senators. But now the Congress, the House of Representatives, is made up of population. So you get so many representatives in Congress based on the population of states. So the white South said, wait a minute, we're getting cheated. So there are more slaves in our states than there are white folks. So what we're going to do about that? Well, they decided to count our ancestors as 3/5 of a person. 3/5 of a person. How dehumanizing. Well, of course, I can understand, because we were not considered as human, we were chattel. 1787, there was a case, Dred Scott case. Dred Scott was a slave and owned by this family, and the doctor was an army doctor and traveled around from state of Missouri to free states like Illinois and Wisconsin and Minnesota. And Dred Scott figured, well, listen, I've been out of my bondage in Missouri, so been to those other 3 states, I ought to be free. So he sued and went to the Supreme Court. Roger B. Taney was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court at that time in a 7-2 vote. Roger B. Taney wrote the majority opinion. First of all, he said that no black man had rights that a white man needed respect. But it also said that even those free blacks in those states that were considered them free still were not citizens. I'm thinking about that lady who stands in the harbor. What do we call her? What do we call her, young folks? The lady that stands in the harbor. Stands in the harbor. Statue of Liberty. In one hand is the Declaration of Independence, and in the other hand is the Constitution. And it says, give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, and promises them the golden door, beckoning them to come to these temperate shores. Our ancestors didn't come in that way. And the First Nation people, the indigenous people, we call Native Americans, I imagine when they saw Columbus coming, they said, oh my God, here goes our neighborhood. And you know, Columbus, it bothers me every September, I think it's the 16th when we celebrate Columbus Day, saying that Columbus discovered America. Columbus got lost. He thought it was in the West Indies. The Native Americans found him. One lie after one lie after one lie. Then there was a case in 1896 called Plessy versus Ferguson. Plessy was a black man who boarded a train in New Orleans owned by the Ferguson Company. And that's when they had colored cars. How many of you have had any experience with colored cars? Just a couple of y'all willing to admit it anyway. I know it was. When my adopted mother's passed in 1950, March of my senior year in high school, my dad said, well, I think, well, since you're out of school, let's take a trip to Arkansas, where both of us were born. And when we got down to Union Station, there was a fellow there hollering, colored to the left, white to the right. Colored to the left, white to the right. As a 17-year-old, that was an experience for me. Although it's interesting, you see, I came out of a segregated school. When Brown versus Board of Education, 17th of May, 1954, I was a sophomore in all-black junior college. The 3rd floor of Lincoln High School. Anybody here at Lincoln High School? Oh, well, my sister. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, sister. Lincoln High School. I came out quite a few years before either one of you did, though. But, you see, I learned both at R.T. Cole's Vocational High and Lincoln High from teachers who taught us not for a living, but because they wanted us to learn, because they prepared us for this day. Now, the sad and tragic thing about that, though, is that, well, let me ask the question rather than make the statement. Are we preparing our young people for this day? Because it's here. Let me continue now with Plessy versus Ferguson. In that Supreme Court decision, it was said that as long as something was equal, it could be separate. But May 17, 1954, I was a sophomore at that all-black junior college. The third floor, did the two of you from Lincoln High School, did you know that the third floor was Lincoln Junior College? So all we had to do, if we graduated in May, that's September, if you wanted to go to junior college, because we couldn't go to the white junior college at 39th and McGee. So we just go up to the third floor. We had more, oh my God, we had more black PhDs and master's degrees in 2 black schools than we did in all 8 of the white schools. Every day was Black History. I never shall forget when Brown versus Board of Education was handed down. Dr. Gerard T. Bryant, a brilliant, statuesque kind of a man of African ancestry. And he said, young people, this is a major decision in this nation. He said, but if white folks don't accept it, 50 years from today, we'll be just as segregated as we are today. Oh, Dr. Bryant, you've been gone. That's now it's some 60 years ago, 1954, and there's much segregation in public education in 2023 as there was in 1954. Let's suppose, come go with me, just let's suppose. Let's suppose that this nation of ours, the land of the free, the home of the brave, let's just suppose that it never intended to give full citizenship to the descendants of slaves. Think about that a minute. Let's just suppose that this nation of ours, the land of the free, the home of the brave, never intended to give full citizenship to the descendants of slaves. Now, if you start at 1619, when our ancestors first landed there in Virginia, and you come up to 2023, all the laws, the 13th Amendment, 1865, freed the slaves. The 14th Amendment, 1867, made the slaves citizens. In 1868, the right to vote. Stay with me now. 2023, we're still trying to find our right to vote. Is there the possibility that this nation never intended for full citizenship for the descendants of slaves? We've passed laws. We've passed the Civil Rights Law in 1964. We passed the Voting Rights Act of 1965, 100 years after it was passed in 1868. And what's happening to the vote today? Suppression. And you know, we used to talk about this North won the war. That was a civil war. The war between the states. It was about slavery. It was about slavery. When Abraham Lincoln in 1863, by executive order, passed the Emancipation Proclamation, but it only affected the slaves in those states that were in rebellion against the Union. Now, do you think that those slave owners were going to say, okay, y'all, go ahead. Go on your way now. You're free. You go on your way. Go boys and girls. Go. No, 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 no. Let's just suppose, though. that with all those laws that have been passed, who's still in control? It ain't the North. The North might have won the battle, but the South won the war. Look what's happening today. It's those southern states that are still standing by all kinds of laws that bar us from being full citizens in these United States of America. Florida, Governor DeSantis, who was going to be a candidate for the presidency, said that black history has no place in the state of Florida. States all around, even this state of Missouri has a Senate bill that's pending in the Senate now called Parents' Rights. That means if you don't want your kids to go to school with my kids, then you can send them, take a voucher and send them to private or parochial school. Just as suppose that this nation of ours never intended for the descendants of slaves to be totally free. If it was the case, we'd be free. So how does change come? With the help of the Lord, and after we get on our knees, get up and go to work. Since if you take all black folks, our Jewish brothers and sisters, our Muslim brothers and sisters, gay, trans, whatever the case might be, all those from foreign countries, particularly south of the border, if you had all those folks together, we don't have enough power to set us free. So what does that mean? That means that those that are in the majority are going to have to do something. Join us in our struggle. Walk with us in our shoes. Now, you can't be us, but you certainly can become educated enough, knowledgeable enough about our struggle. And also, I cannot forget our indigenous people, Native Americans, in 1830 when Andrew Jackson passed the Indian Removal Act. Indian Removal Act. The Europeans came in, y'all get off y'all land, y'all go to Oklahoma and die from smallpox. Those were the quote-unquote good Indians. The savages were Geronimo, Sitting Bull. Those were the savages because they refused to give up their land and go to Oklahoma with those army blankets that was filled with smallpox that they died from, made alcoholics out of them. Something's wrong, my brothers and sisters. I believe in prayer. I believe also that God gives us the strength and the will and the knowledge to stand on what God built, our faith. But it goes beyond that. It's time to go to work and liberate ourselves, but at the same time reach out to our brothers and sisters of the lighter hue, that you've got a role to play in this. And you see, the interesting thing about it, if my theory is right, that this nation never intended for the descendants of slaves to be totally free. And I believe this because I call it America's structural racist system. And every institution is structurally racist. Now, who are the beneficiaries of that structural racist system? Like we are the descendants of slaves, then it's descendants of the slaveholders who are in control of that structurally racist system. That's painful to hear sometimes. That's why folks don't want to talk about the struggle of black folks, the descendants of slaves, because it makes them feel guilty to say that, you mean to say, Brooks, that my great-great-grandparents were slaveholders? Yeah. And that I'm a beneficiary of that structured racist system? Yes. And the question becomes, what are you going to do about it? You have to call it as it is, even if they turn the mic off on you. Because it's nothing like telling the truth. They talk about reconciliation. You remember when, some of you may and may not, when Mandela got out of prison and de Klerk was in charge of South Africa, they stood up together, one South Africa. And Bishop Desmond Tutu formed the commission called the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. But my brothers and sisters, you can't get to reconciliation unless you tell the truth. If the pastor and I are neighbors and there's an easement drive, no one has priority in that drive. But if I continue to block that drive and pastor says to me, Brooks, you know, you blocked my drive, I said, man, you know, so? So he takes me to court. And the judge says, I don't want to hear this. I want to send it to conciliation. In conciliation, somebody's got to tell the truth. Because if you don't, then the pastor can take back to your court and say, Your Honor, said Brooks never stopped doing what the person who was chairing the reconciliation session said. What's going to happen, then the judge is going to fine me. My point is, you've got to tell the truth to have reconciliation. And so here we are, 2023. I'm 90 years old. Now, I know I don't look a day over 110, Pastor, but I'm 90 years old. I've been through quite a bit. I wrote my memoirs, by the way, that are out front for sale if you'd like to purchase one. I was born May 3rd, 1932 in North Little Rock, Arkansas, Pulaski County. I'm the product of the son of a 14-year-old mother and a 17-year-old father, Thomasine Gilder Wilbermore Herring. I was adopted by the Brookses. I didn't know I was adopted until I was 22 years old. I was on the police department, in the police academy, and this lady continued to write to me, and I didn't know what was going on, so I asked my father, I said, Dad, this woman keeps writing me and asking about you and about Mom, and I don't even know what she's talking about. He said, what's her name? I said, as soon as I mentioned Thomasine, he looked like he had seen a ghost. Tears came into his eyes. He said, son, if I were you, I wouldn't continue to communicate with people like that. You never know what they had, what they're trying to do. So I went home and said to my wife, I said, you know, I went out to talk to Dad, and that lady's been writing. I said, I asked him about that, and he looked kind of funny. Something's wrong. So I continued to correspond with her. This was in August of 1954. In October of 54, after telling her how many kids we had, I was on the police department, I graduated from college, and this kind of thing. In her letter in October, she said, I hope I know my grandkids better than I know my son. Christmas Day, 1954, she asked me, she said, can I come visit with you and your family during the Christmas holiday? And I said, yes, ma'am. I'd gotten off from police department. I worked 12 to 8 a.m. and we had 3 kids. And it was, my wife knew they weren't supposed to come down. 2 were walking and there was a baby. And they weren't supposed to come down until I came in the door and said, ho, 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 Santa Claus is here. So I came in, ho, 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 Santa Claus. And they come running down and so I stripped down except my police pants and T-shirt and some house shoes. Phone ring, every time it rang, I'd say, Brooks residence, Merry Christmas. And one time I said, Brooks residence, Merry Christmas. And I could hear in the background, TWA, brand of Continental, flight songs and this kind of thing. And that voice said, Alvin, this is your mother. I'm at the airport. Can you pick me up? I said, yes, ma'am. So I switched. It was cold that Christmas morning. And I stripped down and got my jeans on and everything. And all the way to the airport passed, and I realized, I don't know what my mother looks like. And I know she don't know what I look like. But thank God that particular Christmas day weren't too many black folks traveling. And I I can see her now with that red suit on. Fur across her arm and a hat to match the fur and white blouse with a red, almost like a tie. And when I looked up and saw her, I knew that was my mother. And we hugged and cried right there in the center of the airport. Folks thought we was crazy. God's been good to me. I don't know about y'all, but I've had more. But let me reflect just a little bit. I'm not going to hold you much longer. Let me reflect just a little bit. When I was growing up here in Kansas City with the Brookses, my dad and mom brought me to Kansas City, and I was about 9 months old in 1933. And we've got young folks here. I'm not going to tell you how my dad got here, but you can read it in the book, what he did to have to come to Kansas City. You know it was something bad, don't you? But anyway, as I grew up as a young black boy in this city, in these United States of America, again, the land of the free, the home of the brave, the kind of things that I went through as a little black boy are in my book. But I can remember one incident where white officers picked me and my 4 white friends up. Our house burned down. We had to live in a barn for about a week or 10 days, actually a barn, and some men in the community. We lived out by the Veterans Hospital. The Veterans Hospital wasn't there then. And my dad used to farm that, calf corn and cane and everything. And in fact, my dad had everybody believing that he owned all that land. And when the Veterans Hospital, that's where I met Harry Truman. He was there, president, when they built that hospital. GSA bought all that property. My dad would stand with his bib overall and say, "Oh, that's mine." When my dad died in 1961, I was a detective on the police department. It took me 5 years to pay for his funeral with Watkins. Everybody thought I was rich because the tale that my dad had told, all that land is mine. My white friends and I my white friends just told me about, there was a Velvet Freeze ice cream store at Linwood, Indiana. Y'all remember that? So my white friends said, well, listen, if you go there, you can get this big ice cream cone for a nickel. So we was hunting pop balls. At that time, you hunt pop balls, you can get 2 cents a piece. So we were walking around the community with pop balls. We'd go up there. Well, as soon as I got ready to go in, the girl came to the door and said, "You can't come in." I said, "Why?" She said, "You just can't come in." So I gave my nickel to my white friend, and went and brought my ice cream and brought it out. And I began now as an 8 or 9-year-old. What? I go to all-black school, lived in an all-black community. What's going on here? Just at 8 or 9 years old. Then one day when we were together and the police picked us up, 2 police officers. One who was older had been drinking because we could smell him. He looked like he was about 14 months pregnant. And he put all 5 of us in the back of this police car. A lady had some problem with some kids and took us there, lined us up against the car. She said, "Oh, no, that's not the, I know Alvin. He goes to get prescription for my brother who's bedridden, and he lives right across there. That's his house right there." So we get ready to walk out. My mother fed everybody. Miss Brooks fed everybody. Officer said, "Get back in the car." I said, "Well, I'll live with, get back in the car." And they drove me around. And they told my white friends who they should not associate with. They say, "You white trash, but he's a..." And even though you white trash don't associate with him. And so then he drove us around, and he said, "But he's our friend. You can't be no friend because he's a..." So they're at the bottom of the hill, at the Brighton Hill, still stand. All got out the car. He said, "You come here, little N." So you see that hill? If you can make it up to the top of that hill, you're a free in. I'm screaming, hollering, and he pulled his gun out and cocked it. I'm praying, don't shoot me. I'm just crying and screaming backwards. And my white friends, don't shoot Alvin, don't shoot Alvin. And Billy, the youngest, jumped up on his arm. The gun went off. And I was running as fast backwards, Pastor, as they were running forward. And we got up to the top of the hill, and every time we did something we thought we was in trouble, we'd take a piece of glass and prick our fingers and mix it, probably blood brothers. I wonder if they know they got some black blood in them, wherever they are. So it was a lot of fun. So Billy slipped away and went and told my mother, and she called. She said, what's this about police shooting at you? And we said, no, the police went, yes. And he said, yes, they did. So she called the police station. Sergeant came out, never got out of his car. My mother walked up and told him through the window, and he called each one of us, me first. And we sat in the back, and finally he said, we'll be back. Well, we're still waiting for that sergeant to get back. When I was on the police department, a fellow named Herschel Williams killed William Kenner, who was a police detective. I was riding. It was the 5th of May, 1955. My probation wasn't up to 1st of June. And I heard these shots, and I said, May, what is firecrackers doing at May? It happened in front of the old Lincoln Theater at 18th and Lydia, those of you who are old enough. Mm-hmm. And as I was running, I saw this person being helped by 11 people, and his whole shoulder was blown off. And blood was just profusely coming out. And a fellow walked up to my police car and said, hey, Brooks, there's the car that shot, that's Bill, and here's Bill's gun. So I took out after the car, told the dispatcher, and he ended up behind Virginia Liquors at 1601 Tracy. And I had my spotlight on him. And 2 white officers came up with 6 shooters, and I said, police, I shot at the car just to bring him out, not at him. So when he came out, he was going over the fence. I could see both his hands, had my spotlight on, no gun. And so they emptied their gun. They didn't do well on the range because none of those 12 shots hit him. And they was hollering at me, shoot the bee, shoot the bee. Now you know what I'm saying, bee. Shoot the bee, shoot the bee. And I never shot him. I had the shotgun. I was only 30 feet away. I could have blown him away. So he got away, at least for a moment or two. So I secured the car, the gun, and by that time, police officers began to assemble there at the corner of 16th and Tracy. And I heard the major, Eugene Pond, who was over investigation, say, where is the bee? Where is the bee? Where is the bee? And I thought he was talking about the person that shot the police officer. He's talking about me. And somebody said, there he is. So I walked up and I'm 5'11", about 157 pounds. And this is a fellow about 5'7", real feisty, probably 170 pounds. He walked up to me and poked me in my chest. You're no good. You're no good. You're no good. This is your last song. And everything that you can think about that I'm not saying, that's what he said to me. And I'm standing there. And my mother told me, my brothers and sisters, there'll be times when white folks will say or do something to you, and you may not be able to do anything about it, but at least be man enough to let them know what they're doing or what you resent. So when he got through, I said, my mama said, okay, it's time. Now I'm 22 years old now. She said that when I was 7 or 8 years, a teenager. But I remember, Mama said, now's the time. I said, Major, are you finished? He said, you're so-and-so right. I said, Major, and I put my finger on it. Oh, my God. I said, Major, you or nobody else can tell me when to kill somebody. And I walked away. When I went home that night, I went back to the scene after making reports and everything. It was about 2 o'clock now. I suppose I got off at 12. And I told my wife what had happened. I said, I might as well take my stuff down there now. And she said, no, don't take it. So that night we prayed. Gosh, she squeezed my hand. So we prayed every night when I got home. She was praying and she just squeezed my hand. And we prayed. I always took a shower, but I didn't. I looked in the mirror and I started crying. The next morning, the brother police officer began to call me and tell me, hey, we got your back, we'll do this and those so-and-so, this kind of thing. When I went to work that afternoon, the lieutenant says, here's somebody said, attention. The lieutenant walked in and said, at ease. He said, give Al Brooks a good hand for what he did last night. God works in mysterious ways. I'm still here. Let me close. Now, I'm not going to be like the typical minister. I'm not going to close 3 or 4 times. Not this time. Every time I got into difficulty as a young black boy growing up, and my mother found out about it, she would call me in. She had an old lime green rocking chair. She had on one side was the Bible, on the other side was the stacks of newspapers. And she'd call me in, and I'd get on my knees, and she'd put the left side of my head in her lap and pat me. She sang a little bit of Precious Lord, read a couple of verses from one of the scriptures, and pray this prayer. And I can hear Mama now. God, help my baby to become the kind of man that you want him to be. Well, Mama, I hope that I've lived up to what you wanted me to be in God. There's a dream in the land with his back against the wall. My mother's name and strain this dream is sometimes called. There are those that claim this dream for theirs alone, a sin for which we know they must atone. Unless this dream is shared in common like sunlight and like air, this dream would die for lack of substance anywhere. This dream knows no frontier or tongue. It knows no class nor race. But this dream cannot be held secure in any one locked place. But today, this dream is in battle with his back against the wall. But to save the dream for one, it must be saved for all. Langston Hughes, African-American poet, 1964. And finally, the late Dr. Benjamin Mays, president of that prestigious black men's college in Atlanta, Georgia, called Morehouse. I have 5 Morehouse men in my family, 2 grandsons and 3 nephews. Dr. Mays wrote a 9-line poem that I found so profound, just 9 lines, and it's called God's Minute. Dr. Mays says, "I've only just a minute, only 60 seconds in it. It was forced upon me. I didn't seek it, didn't choose it, but it's up to me to use it. I will suffer if I can lose it. I must give account if I abuse it. Just a tiny little minute, but eternity is in it." And my brothers and my sisters, that's all life is. It's that minute. That minute becomes our Alpha and our Omega, our beginning and our end. The question becomes that since we're still living our minute, will we do those kinds of things that God would have us to do? Will we do those kind of things that the pastor preaches about, and we read about, we talk about, and we teach our children about? But you can't teach what you don't know. So thank you, my brothers and sisters, for inviting me. I've only told half the story, but the story goes on. God bless you. Thank you. Yes. I know I've gone about a half hour over, but anyway, anybody got any comments, any questions? Anyone? Yes, ma'am. Yes. Oh. Any burning question? Yes, ma'am.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much, first of all. I am just thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. This was just so amazing, and I just so appreciate it. And my husband and our 2 kids are here, and so I'm just so glad we all got to hear this together. When you talked about coming to Kansas City from Arkansas and how it wasn't good, my grandmother on my dad's side, that's the same story, coming from Mississippi, that it wasn't good when they left to get here. So it just made me think of that. But as you talk about preparing our children for the future, kind of what are your thoughts on some specific things? I have 2 questions, I'm sorry. The first one is, what are your thoughts on specific things that we can do? And the other one is, how have you been able to connect and bring people on as allies who have been beneficiaries of this system? I know have some friends who since 2020 have become more aware and become allies in that sense, but I also have friends who've been much more resistant and saying, no, none of this is good, BLM is a terrorist group, that kind of thing. So what do you do?
Well, first of all, I think you have to be a person of faith. Make sure your kids are persons of faith. And then with someone, I have a grandson who's a Morehouse man and also a graduate of Emory School of Theology. He has 2 kids, 8 and 6, both full-blown sickle cell. They go through crisis all the time. Tariq and his wife, Shakira, read to those kids. They started reading to those kids before they knew they were being read to. And now, of course, they're so bright because I'm their great-great-grandfather. But they read to them. And he doesn't read Dick and Jane and the dog and the white picket fence. He's reading about us as a people of African ancestry. And I think you do that. You have to teach them because the family and the mother in particular is the first teacher. And that's where it begins, I believe. And it happened in my generation. We didn't have a lot of books, and the books were for somebody else. But they talked about the history, oral history. And the other thing is that I think reach out to those folk who will listen, who are descendants of slave owners, and try to build a coalition. I used to think that you could do that with church exchange, but that's artificial, that's superficial. It doesn't last too long. They say, well, we were over there at Bethel, and we had a nice choir, and the preacher did the preaching, and then next they come back next Black History Month. But I think you have to begin to build a coalition with some folks who are willing to listen, who are willing to, first of all, admit, yes, I am the descendant of slaveholder. And yes, I respect you being the descendant of slaves. And I think that's the way you have to do it. And it's, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And that's an elephant. Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, sir. Oh, I thought you had a question. You sure you don't have a question? You have an answer? Oh, neither one. Okay, all right. Anybody? It's been my pleasure. God bless you. God keep you is my prayer. Thank you so much.
Yeah, let's give Mr. Brooks another hand. Thank you. Ready? All right, y'all, thank you again to Mr. Brooks. Right after service, we're going to let him go out and get set up. He has 6 books. Well, I'm sorry, he has 5 books, because I got to get one. Oh, he got more than that. All right, he is willing to sign his books. As I listened to Mr. Brooks today, I said, you know what? He's not telling us what we want to hear today. He's telling us what we need to hear. And sometimes what we need to hear, as my old pastor say, is tight, but it's right. And today we needed to hear this, not from someone who read about it, but with his 90 years of wisdom, someone who experienced it. I think it's very, and I'm going to say this and I'm going to sit down, I think it's very relevant that in the week that we gathered on Wednesday, we celebrated the Chiefs and we walked through those streets and we would celebrate and they was throwing beers and stuff out into the crowd. How we need to be reminded of this Black history, that some of those streets we weren't free to walk around. Some of those same streets we weren't free to celebrate. As we look at, and I go to the plaza and see the lights, and I learn about J.C. Nichols and learn that in the past that wasn't where we were welcome. So we do see progress. We see how the Lord is bringing us together, but we still must reflect because there's still so much work to be done. There's still so much work to be done, and we're just thankful for our brothers and sisters of different hues, as Mr. Brooks said. One thing we did say during Black History Month is we don't often talk about our brothers and sisters of a different hue that went to jail with us, that were beaten and killed with us. And we thank God for those. And today we still need those brothers and sisters of different hues that's willing to walk alongside us because the struggle is real. So y'all, let's give the Lord a hand clap of praise. Thank you one more time to Mr. Brooks. We're going to give you an opportunity, Mr. Brooks. The First Lady can escort him to the back, and then he can also get set up. Really want our young people just go by and shake his hand, because you're shaking the hand of a legend. A legend, not because he wrote an album or he swung a baseball bat or he caught a football, but a legend because of the struggle, of what he endured, so that we can have some freedom here in this city. So thank you again. We have our benediction.